It's time again for another episode of the Doc Review Show. Today we're taking a look at the art of the prank.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Doc Review Show. I'm your host, Alan Berry, and joining me as always is Indiana's #1 educator, Justin, a.k.a. Mr. Hand Seymour. What's happening, man?
All right, so let's explain the reference again this week.
Wait, did you get it?
Mr.
Hand.
What a hand. Oh, is this from South Park? What is this?
No, but that's a decent guess, but it's not. That's Mr.
What is
Hanky,
Mr. Hand? Yeah, so I don't know. What was Mr. Hand?
Mr. Hand's Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Aloha. My name is Mr. Hand.
But no, see, this is the thing. You're going to have to explain the reference every week. I like this. This is good. This is the thing we do.
Well, we may like it, but I don't know if anybody else is enjoying it, so we'll find out.
Sure.
Justin, last week it was your choice of what movie we were going to watch. You decided on the art of the prank, so tell me about it.
Right, so this week on the Doc Review Show, we're going to look at the art of the prank, which follows artist and prankster Joey Scaggs, who has kind of made a career of embarrassing the media, and he's made that part of his art form. I thought it was an interesting story, actually. It just seemed like interesting to me that one guy is responsible for a huge amount of media hoaxes, which is essentially what Joey Scaggs does, is he intentionally creates hoaxes for the media to pick up, and he does that as part of his art form. Then he reveals later that it was all a hoax. The point of that, it seems, to make people think about their media diet. What is it they're taking in? What is it that they're willing to believe?
You never believe all the things you see on television. Hoaxes performed before your very eyes.
Don't you feel bad when you do it?
I feel very good.
I was pissed off at Joey for a period of time, but I decided to forgive him because Joey does what I really love, and that is he makes you laugh, and when he makes you laugh, he makes you think.
He sets himself up these challenges, right? It seems like an interesting challenge to be able to say, what can I persuade people to believe? And I think that's kind of brilliant, actually.
Let's back up a little bit. In the beginning, it really stems from he was against the Vietnam War, rightfully so. And I think that's where it all started from, because the fact that he had some type of, I believe he put up like a crucifix, but it was all skeletons. So it wasn't a Jesus, it's just of skeletons. And they end up getting arrested. But what came out in the press was other things, hippies busted, or I forget what it was, but it basically...
It was like littering in the park or whatever in Manhattan or something.
Right. So the news media did absolutely the opposite of what Scaggs wanted to happen. And he also realized that the news media doesn't always say what really happened.
I watched how the media twisted and torqued the intent, content, meaning of the message to suit their own agenda. And I realized that the media has an amazing ability to mold public opinion. So I decided, rather than just use the media to try to get attention for my work, I would use the media as part of my work, exploit their vulnerability, gullibility, necessity for being out there first, and incorporate this into a theatrical performance, and then see what happens.
I don't know what you call these performance art pieces, I guess you would call them that.
Yeah.
So one of his early pieces, he had this message he wanted to send, and what came out in the media once they were, arrested for doing this, was that the message he was trying to get across did not come across at all. So he said, basically switched his mindset from, how can I use the media to make people aware of my art, to saying, how can I make the media a part of my art? And that's essentially where he has gone since then. And I thought that was a pretty brilliant and interesting way to think about doing art.
I see some good stuff. I see some bad stuff. But the art part of it, I agree with. I think it's always good to stick the stick in the beehive a little bit and shake it up, especially when it comes to press and just how little they back check items that they're going to air on the news. And, if you're going to have a broadcast called news or somewhere have the name news in it, then you should really check your facts. And I think that was a big point here, is that they don't. I think most of us know that. I'm sure, have you ever heard of Baba Booey or like Howard Stern's
Maybe.
So Howard
I'm not
Stern,
sure.
he was never big here, but Howard Stern has this. People would call into shows, and they would be telling the news host some farce, some prank idea, and at the end they would always go "Baba Booey, Baba Booey." And,
right.
And so that became a big thing, and I think it's died out over the years. But
Baba Booey, Baba
part of
Booey.
his thing was showing how the media didn't actually fact check all their information.
Yeah, I think that is the primary message of his art, is that, you know, he can, if he can convince the media of some kind of ridiculous thing. You want to name some of his ridiculous things that he did. So one of the first things that got a lot of attention was he created the brothel for dogs. I think he just put out an ad in the newspaper saying that it was a cat house for dogs.
Right, and that they had hot bitches waiting.
Yeah, literally, yeah, hot bitches waiting, yeah. And so the news picked it up, and I think they called him, and there was no real cat house for dogs. There was nothing there. It was just something he put into the newspaper, you know. And then once he started getting calls from news agencies saying, we want to come see this thing, we want to film this place, and he got some friends together and some dogs, and they staged this cat house for dogs, right, for this news reporter.
In the United States, there is a myth of the happy-go-lucky vagabond, the carefree mutt with no master and no leash, who comes and goes as he pleases and does whatever his nose tells him to do. This establishment in Greenwich Village is a cat house for dogs. By that, we do not mean a stud service. We mean a house of prostitution for dogs. For $50, your dog can have sex with a female dog while you watch and sip cocktails and take some pictures if you'd like to.
It was such an obvious idea to me. First of all, there are hundreds of thousands of dogs in the city. There's a dog population problem. People are willing to take their dogs to dog restaurants. I thought it would be natural to get their dogs sexually gratified.
Then it goes all over the media, and they start picking up this story left and right, and it's obviously something that's not real. And they get these, and the genius of what he was doing was not only would he have the media come film this thing, he would actually get people that were against whatever he would have people pretend to be against whatever he was doing to make it seem legitimate and real.
Yeah, that was a smart call from him, is to have the opposite show up so it seems more realistic. The part about the brothel thing that I think it hit the press after he was basically going to be arrested. They brought him in on charges,
Right.
didn't they? And
Yeah, he goes to court for that.
Today, at the State Attorney General's office, Scaggs and his attorney appeared in response to a subpoena.
And miraculously, the subpoena was for April 1st, April Fool's Day.
He says the hoax was a conceptual art piece and an expensive one.
For what purpose? Well, it says a lot about the media. I hope that it will change the viewing audience's opinion and change their perspective as to what media really is. There's a media reality. Television is not necessarily reality.
It makes me wonder now, if someone did something like that, is there legal ramifications against someone messing with the news? And this has actually been I think this is the most interesting piece of this whole documentary. And I think it was very timely for this documentary to come out. So he is, if you want to call it this, really the father of what we are now calling in 2017 fake news. You know what I mean? Like, he is this guy who's literally intentionally creating fake news. What's interesting is, you know, I was kind of inspired. I was like, man, I would almost love to try to pull something like that off as well, because it seems not only fun, but challenging. But I'm like, now I think about it in 2016 and 17, with how fragmented our society is and how much distrust people have of media, like legitimate news media, really trying to do a good job of reporting what's going on in the world. Is it ethical to be messing with the media like this? I understand he's trying to kind of be what they call him, the quality control of the media, because it forces them to do quality reporting and back checking and fact checking all their stuff. But it almost makes me wonder, is it ethical? Sorry, go ahead.
I think it's very ethical for him to do it, because the fact that, again, these are news outlets and they should be making sure that they fact check. And I think that their rebuttal would be is that they don't have the budget to have the staff to be able to do that. Well, then you can't go live with this story. You're going to have to wait to show it. The one thing that I guess I didn't, well, actually, there's a few things I don't like about this movie, but when you're talking about is it ethical to push around the media, I don't think it's a big deal, because a good media would figure out that it's a hoax. The thing I didn't like was how, in his mock documentary that he makes for a film festival.
It hits personal, right? It hits home for you.
Oh, no, not because I make documentaries. I don't care about that.
Dead Man's Line, the true story of Tony Kuritzis.
All right, let me set this up better. So he's making a documentary that he wants to enter into film festivals and kind of dupe film festivals into believing that it's a real documentary. And the story's about like GMOs and stuff like that, right?
It's hard to say what it's really about, but
right. So basically, they're saying that
I think they said there's some kind of secret like experimentation going on the island of, I think, Kauai, where he lives in Hawaii. Like some kind of weird stuff going on.
It has something to do with shark DNA or shark thing, because he's growing shark teeth out of his mouth from it. But the thing that I don't like is they show a guy that's been in a wheelchair, or they're showing him to been in a wheelchair, and now all of a sudden he can walk.
He takes the attention away from my shark teeth. I want everyone to have a piece to say, especially Warren.
And saying that how this shows promising results for people. And I think that people that have lived with lifelong problems like this, even though it sounds silly, you try to grasp upon anything that may help you with whatever disease you have. So if you dupe these people as well, you're giving them false hope. And I think it's as dickheaded thing as when somebody gives you a fake lottery ticket that says that you're a winner. I just think it's dickish.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying with that. That's true. I didn't think about that, but that's a great point. What he was kind of duping people on there, I think that was the stem cell research part of his fake documentary he's working on. Right. He's trying to convince people that they were using like shark stem cells to regenerate things in their bodies, but as an effect, he was accidentally growing like shark teeth or something like that. Some kind of ridiculous,
which is funny.
thing.
I mean, that's fine.
Which is funny. Yeah. But perhaps if we watched the documentary, maybe we wouldn't think it is as dickish. Maybe.
Well, now check it out.
But I agree with you.
So I think it probably is. And my reason behind that is if a quality film festival is not going to take a movie in that they think is a hoax, that they think is a farce, unless it's presented in that light. So if he got accepted into film festivals, then that film must poignantly say or show that this is a real thing and that it's working. And as they're showing at film festivals, I think there's probably good odds that somebody in those audiences had a relative or has a friend or has a spouse that has some type of disability that they'll believe this will help. And then all of a sudden they start Googling it or whatever. And I don't know. And then they find out it's a hoax. Or before it was revealed that it was a hoax, you wouldn't know then. You would still be trying to find out information.
So this documentary is set up in a way where it goes back and shows early hoaxes, and it's also following a current hoax he's working on, which is this fake documentary we're talking about.
So they have a lot of archival footage, and they kind of start out with that, which was really on the plus side of this documentary. I thought whoever searched out all this archival footage, they did a great job. I don't know if Scaggs had it in his, if he had in his media library, but they did find a lot of good archival footage. And just to go back to the point of it being dicky on the shark stuff, most of his pranks were not dicky. Most of his pranks were, you could say, juvenile, or some of them were funny, but I found a lot of them really not that funny. I mean, I only found myself chuckling a couple times in the whole movie, so I didn't really think the movie was funny. But
right. So, but I don't think his goal was really so much to be funny. Like it is funny, it's ridiculous, but I don't think his pranks were so much to be funny as to make a point about what the media is willing to air and not back check. So he would make them kind of ridiculous pranks, or I don't want to call them pranks, but he would do these kind of ridiculous things that he could somehow get the media to pick up and be like, oh, this is a real story. Like, for example, when he pretended to be a roach doctor, which had cures to diseases. That's the other thing, like you're talking about, like, people willing to believe things, that he was a doctor that been doing research with roaches, and he said they were the cure for mankind's diseases and all this stuff. The one that I thought was pretty funny, or kind of genius one was the 1976 celebrity sperm bank auction, where the celebrity sperm had gotten stolen, and I thought that was pretty funny.
So you've said genius a few times. I'm going to take issue with that.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that Scaggs likes to present himself also as somebody that has done something in the world for fellow man in a way. I think that that's what he would like his rubes to do, or his pranks to do, is affect some type of change. Yeah. I see none of that. I don't see really how he's affected the world in much of any way, other than maybe having some people laugh. But he doesn't really. He hasn't really affected or changed any of some of these important issues that he's trying to bring up. And that to me is I don't know. I just think
that lacks the genius part,
right?
For you, yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I can see that. You're right.
Genius is the highest to me. That's like the highest bar. So if he got
sure,
if he got laughs, made money, and did good for the fellow man by making a change, I would say it would be genius. And I also don't think he's the forefather of this. I think that he's one of the, he's a big name in doing this, but pranks have been going on since forever. I mean, as far as not forever, but at least in the 50s, I'm sure I know my dad telling me some pranks they would do. These pranks have always been done. Radio DJ hosts always do pranks. And I just think that, yes, he's probably one of the most prolific pranksters, but I don't know if he was the father of it.
Sure. I think when I'm saying genius, I just think of these. I think it's just kind of interesting, the ideas he comes up with. You know what I mean? There's things I would never think to do, and I think that's why for me, I'm like, whoa, okay, I would never think to do that. And that's why probably.
Do you know how many things you probably do that he would never think of?
That's a fair enough point.
I mean, it's just I just wasn't impressed with it. He seemed like a okay guy. He seemed like a good dude. But one of the questions I always had is how does he make money? How does he? I was
thinking the same thing. How does he make a living?
It looks like he's living off mom. In his later in life.
It could be. I was actually wondering the same thing. I don't know, because they don't talk about how he actually makes a living, and he is supporting, or I mean, he's helping. It looks like take care of his mother as she's gotten older.
But what did he even do when he was younger?
Correct. Right. I don't know. He was trying to be an artist, so I don't know if he was selling art on the street or what he was doing.
Well, since they didn't say it, right? They didn't say what he did. So I would speculate. And of course I could be 100% wrong. He didn't do shit. He either had shitty jobs that he didn't want to talk about, or he was kind of a valette. He was kind of a leech, just sucking off either society or his mom. Or maybe his parents were wealthy, because some of the things they do are fairly expensive. Like they go out to Hawaii to do this documentary about this false documentary about the sharks. And no, he's not paying any of the people that goes with him, but he does pay their hotel, food, and flight. Well, if you've ever paid for Hawaii, you know how much that trip cost. So and the other thing, at one point in the movie, he says something, I can't work or I can't do certain things. I forget what it was. He said he likes to wake up when he wants to wake up and have a laugh.
To live the lifestyle he wants to live, he says that, that requires some degree of sacrifice.
Right, but I didn't see any sacrifice, first of all. And second of all, fucking A, wouldn't we all want to live like that? Wouldn't we all want to just chill?
Sure, yeah.
To get up when I want to get up, sleep when I want to sleep, eat what I want to eat, and that's it. It's really, you think it sounds easy. It's not easy. It's a very difficult thing to do, and you give up many things in doing that. But I couldn't live it any other way. I don't want to live it any other way.
I don't know about him as an individual, to be honest with you. I don't know either way. But
I didn't. I don't really have a character judgment about him based on the film. You know what I was thinking during the film, and it never covered it, so I'm almost certain this must not be the case. But I was trying to predict it. I was about 20 minutes in. I was like, "Is this guy? Do you know who Vermin Supreme is?"
No.
If you need to Google Vermin Supreme and then put a picture of Vermin Supreme up on the podcast, he's a guy who runs for president. I think he ran in like 2012 and 14 or whatever. and he's this like insane individual and wears like a boot on his head, and he's clearly like this prankster, like trying to run for president.
Number 2, of course, time travel research. I am the only candidate who will go back in time and kill baby Hitler with my bare hands before he's even born.
Mm-hmm. I was like, is this guy Vermin Supreme? Like, I wondered if he was, but they never covered it in the news, because this guy gets in the news like every presidential election in the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 cycles, I guess. And then I tried to Google that a little bit, but I didn't see any information on that.
Yeah, I didn't either. But that also goes back to, I think there's multiple people that do pranks. Have you ever heard of the Yes Men?
No, I've not heard of the Yes Men.
So the Yes Men, they put out 2 documentaries. They're pranksters.
So what's your name, sorry? My name is Dick Impala. I'm with Environment Canada. You don't really work for Environment Canada, do you?
If you want to see a better documentary about pranking, I would check that out. They're called the Yes Men, and I could go into some of the stories, but they do. It seems like their targets are mostly either business executives or political leaders. And I think everybody enjoys a good shot at a banker or a corrupt politician. But sure. So you might want to check out the Yes Men.
So let's talk about this briefly. What was it? What problems with the documentary did you have when you were watching it?
So one of my biggest issues with how the film was constructed is that they had, you know what B-roll is?
Yeah, like the extra film they've taken. Right.
Yeah. So like footage that goes over top of interviews or other parts. Yeah. So they're supposed to convey what someone is saying or emotion or a direction that they're going in. But whenever you're doing interviews, or it's just a basic way of being able to show other footage, but maybe not necessarily having, like a microphone on somebody. And it helps to, I know the real reason for it though is to hide cuts. So you can put audio together that, splice it together so it sounds like it's continuous when in reality it's chopped up. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah.
And then, so their use of B-roll though, to me was just like, why are you showing me this? So numerous times they show us him cutting the grass. What the fuck does anything got to do with him cutting the grass and him and him walking through his yard? I kept saying, where is this going to? What are they trying to show us this for?
Sure. Like he's talking. So you're saying he's talking about, his work or whatever. And then they show, or his life. Maybe they were trying to like show he lives a normal life while he's talking about his life in some sense. I don't know. Yeah, I agree with you though on that. I thought the same thing with the grass cutting. I'm like, are they just trying to show he's a normal dude or trying to take care of his mom, or what's the deal?
Well, so if it was a normal dude, then they would have added other stuff to it too. I mean, they showed it more than a few times, him cutting the grass or him out in the yard. So it was like an accented point, and I just don't think they had any other footage. And they also used that not only for when he was talking, but to transition from like one plot point to another. They would use that footage, and it's like that does not progress the narrative at all. You're not progressing the story. You're staying in a stagnation, and you're just meandering around, just showing us that you shot some pictures of him cutting the grass. Now, maybe I missed the point. I don't know, but I didn't get that.
Well, that's a good point, because I did notice, despite, I like the idea of this documentary and some of the things it showed, I did find myself kind of, as I'm watching it, not being super pulled in by it in a lot of parts.
Yeah.
And it could be because the narrative was not being pushed forward by the footage they were using.
Well, long story short, for me, what it is, it needed a better editor. This movie could have been about a half hour, and it would have been much better, because I'm with you. I like a good prank. I like a good joke. I like a good, fuck you media type thing. Right. I mean, those are great. But this story, they put a bunch of fluff in here that just did not push the narrative. One of the other things is that, hold on. Oh, okay. So another issue that I had with the movie was the music. I wasn't a big fan of the music. At one point, it sounded like a Danny Elfman. At another point, if you listen to it, it's like 4 notes off of Sweet Home Alabama. And then another song is like a couple notes off of a Stone song. And none of it seemed to fit contextually with the mood that was going on. I know. And one of the biggest things that I hate when they do this is they have music playing with lyrics, so somebody's singing, and then they have somebody talking. It's like you're making the viewer. It's too okay. What am I supposed to be listening to? Should I be listening to these lyrics, or should I be listening to this person talking? And I just hate whenever anybody does that.
The editing felt subpar to you in the film.
Yes, absolutely.
For sure. Yeah, and see, so I'm not a filmmaker, so I don't tend to think about those kind of things a lot. And it's amazing, I think, how those kinds of things can actually make a film, even the same footage, the same story, feel very different.
You don't have to be a filmmaker. I think that what it is these little nuanced things that if they're not done correctly, the viewer may not know why they don't like a movie because they can't pinpoint it, but that's the reason why. And
exactly.
Before I forget, and I know I'm shitting all over this editor, but I have one other thing that I just didn't like. Well, it's not just the editor; it's actually the director and the producer because they signed off on it. Right. Is that, and I'll give you this as nitpicky, but it just bugged the shit out of me. So they have, they're talking about the cockroach thing. They're talking about that story, and they do a little montage of newspapers clippings about that story. But in one of the shots, they have a close-up of the Chicago Tribune Times, and there's no context about him at all. And not only is there no context about him, but the date on the paper is 1992. So I don't know what they're telling me because the story is in 82. All the other news clippings say 82, and it might be 83, so it's somewhere in the 80s. And all the other news clippings either have a picture of him or a title about the story. But then there's this one shot of just the Chicago Tribune or newspaper, and that's it. And
so you think they were trying to just fill that a little bit, make it seem like it was a bigger story than it was?
Yes. Or it was one of those things where they put it in there and then they just, they forgot that, oh shit, there's nothing there. But again, I go back to the director, the editor, the producer, the executive producer. Every frame counts, man. I mean, when you're trying to do that, every frame counts. They would have been better with just not having it there at all. Because it didn't.
Right. No, that's a good point.
Let's see.
I didn't catch that. That's a good catch. Nitpicky, but it's a good catch.
No, it is nitpicky. But if you're going to be, we are criticizing the movie, and I feel, part of the reason is to actually criticize the movie, right?
Yep, I agree with you.
So I'm going to continue. So earlier I was talking about they had some fluff in there. I'm going to give you a specific fluff point. I just want to see how many times I can say fluff. But they had, remember them traveling from, what was it, New York to Hawaii? Why do we need that? Why do we need to see him go to the airport? Why do we need to see him get out of the car? Why do we need to see him go down the escalator? Why do we need to see all this? It was like a good minute and a half of just him traveling. And I just didn't understand, what are we saying? You could show that he's traveling in like 2 cuts, and then all of a sudden the next shot you got him hugging his buddy in Hawaii.
That little segment, I think I got kind of bored, and I was like, I'm gonna look at my phone for a minute, while he's traveling.
Right.
Like, and I didn't feel like I agree with you. I thought that was a fluff. Yeah, if you want to say fluff as many times as we can, I agree.
Hey. We got enough fluffer in there.
Let's go to the final verdict on this one.
All right, sounds good. So obviously, probably from the words you just heard me say, you can tell that I was not a fan of this film. And I'd like to bring up something before I say my verdict from IMDb is a great place to go for reviews. But sometimes I think people associated with the film can do their own reviews. And if nobody else does any reviews, then it kind of clouds it a bit because every review on IMDb thinks this film was the shiznit. And I'll tell you why I said funny, because here's a couple of headlines from IMDb. Very, very funny flick. A brilliant doc on performance. And I kid you not, the one right below it says, a brilliant pioneer of fake news. So that being said, my review of this, I give it a 5. 5 out of 10 on the IMDb scale. I think that this film, I think the guy is an interesting character. I think he deserves a documentary. I just think at an hour and a half, it's an hour too long. And I don't think that he's one of the great satirists. No, that's how you say it. Satirists. Sounds like I'm saying terrorists. But I don't think he's one of the greats.
He's not one of the great terrorists.
Yeah, he's not that. He's not that either. I'm sure he's a good dude. I just don't find him that. I don't find him that interesting or on the genius level of some of the other satirists of the world.
Sure. So I thought it was a story worth watching, but I agree with you. There was some fluff. And there were some things that made it not as the most interesting or compelling story in the world. I thought the story could have maybe been more compelling. Maybe had they made it shorter, more jam-packed with that, interesting things going on. And like I said, I think they made it too long. However, I don't give it a 5. I gave it a 7.5.
A 7.5?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed the documentary. But I agree with you. There were some things that were not as good about it. So worth watching, I thought. I thought it was worth watching, but I don't give it a 10 like IMDb is giving it by any means, or a 9 or even an 8. 7 to 7.5.
So thanks for joining us on the Doc Review Show. We'll see you next week. How about that?
That's perfect. There you go.
Really simple, very effective. Do this next time you're at the airport, right? This is fun to do. You're at the airport and you see somebody waiting for their flight. Okay, they're sitting there reading the paper, whatever, just chilling out. This is what you're gonna do, just like this. You're gonna walk over to them really slowly. Just walk over, all right? Then stand right in front of them. Don't say anything, like wait till they feel you there, you know what I mean? And when they finally look up at you, just really seriously look them right in the eyes and go like this. Don't get on the flight. You know they're sitting there going, I don't think I should get on this fucking flight. I think an angel just told me not to get on the flight. Thank you, angel wearing jeans. How about this one, right? This is a fun one, right? All you need for this is a pair of gloves. Just take your gloves, right? And go down to the bank, get in line behind all the people at the bank, and give the person in front of you a little nudge, just a little nudge. They turn around, and when they turn around, start putting the gloves on and go, now would be a good time to leave. Right now. Either that or take out a piece of paper and pen and go, hey, how do you spell shoot you in the fucking face?